5 strange places on Earth that even top scientists can't explain. Do you believe that there are still places on Earth where the more we study them, the more we realize how much we still don't know? That there is a garden in Italy where enormous monsters are carved into the forest, and the secrets behind them continue to spark debate among researchers? That somewhere in Europe, there is a church decorated with more than 40,000 human bones, from chandeliers to artistic displays? And what's even more fascinating is that behind these places lie not only chilling stories, but also historical mysteries that continue to spark debate to this day. Hello, and welcome to Discovery Fact, where we uncover strange stories, mysterious places, and things that seem like they belong only in movies, but actually exist in the real world. My friends, the vast world beyond us is still filled with countless strange places that we may have never even heard of. Some exist right in the middle of bustling cities, while others are hidden deep in forests or surrounded by the open sea. Yet each one holds stories that continue to leave people curious to this very day. And to prove that, today we're going to visit 5 extraordinary places located in completely different parts of the world. From the Gardens of Bomarzo in Italy, to the Sedlec Ossuary in the Czech Republic, then onward to Tennessee, followed by the Island of the Dolls in Mexico. And finally, we'll head out into the waters of Japan to explore Gunkanjima. Some places will make you curious. Some may send chills down your spine. And some look like nothing less than the setting of a horror movie. If only they had a creepy soundtrack playing in the background. But believe me, it is precisely that thin line between fact, history, legend, and things that cannot yet be fully explained that makes these places so fascinating. So, which one is the most mysterious of them all? Let's begin our journey right now. Bomarzo Monster Garden, the secret hidden park in Italy. Try to imagine yourself leisurely walking through an ancient forest in Italy. The trees are dense, and the surroundings are so quiet that the only sound you can hear is the rustling of leaves. Everything seems completely ordinary, until you turn around a rocky corner and suddenly find yourself face to face with a gigantic monster with its mouth wide open. You take a few more steps, and another bizarre creature appears. Go deeper into the forest, and gods, beasts, and mysterious figures emerge one after another, as if they have been waiting there for hundreds of years. Yes, this is not a scene from a horror movie. You are standing in the Gardens of Bomarzo, in the province of Viterbo, Lazio, Italy, about 42 miles from Rome. The garden was established in 1552 during the Renaissance at the direction of the nobleman Pier Francesco Orsini, also known as Vicino Orsini, 1528-1588. During that period, nobles often built magnificent structures to demonstrate their power and wealth. But Vicino Orsini chose a path unlike anyone else. Instead of creating solemn monuments, he created a garden filled with figures that made people curious, astonished, and at times even sent chills down their spines. So what could have inspired him to create something so unusual? According to historical accounts, Vicino experienced a profound emotional shock following the death of his wife. The garden is believed to have been connected to his grief, his emotional state, and his desire to create a place where he could find peace and contemplation. He enlisted the renowned architect Piero Ligorio, a famous figure of his time, to help design it. And so, a different world gradually took shape within the forest. What makes Bomarzo so unique is the way its sculptures are arranged. They do not follow any clearly defined order. As you walk along the winding paths, you never know what you will encounter behind the next rock. Some of the sculptures were carved directly into enormous blocks of stone. Among the most famous is the figure of Orcus, whose enormous mouth is so wide that you can actually walk inside it. Then mythological figures such as Pegasus, Poseidon, and Proteus emerge from the natural landscape, making the entire garden look like a gigantic puzzle carved out of stone. And this is what makes Bomarzo truly mysterious. The exact meaning behind the garden's entire system of symbols has never been definitively decoded. The garden was neglected for centuries and gradually fell into a state of ruin. It was not until the 1970s that Bomarzo was restored and began attracting attention once again. Today, it has become a famous tourist destination in Italy. But what did Vicino Orsini ultimately intend to express through these monsters? Was it a memorial to his late wife? A symbolic world inspired by mythology? Or simply his way of transforming his pain into art? Do you have an answer to this mystery? Personally, I have to say that perhaps it is precisely because there is no absolute answer that Bomarzo remains so fascinating. Because when you look closely, You begin to feel that the creator of this garden deliberately left behind a puzzle for the people who would live hundreds of years after him. And those people are none other than us, my friends. Sedlec Ossuary, where more than 40,000 human skeletons became works of art. My friends, if the Gardens of Bomarzo made us curious with its stone monsters, then the next destination is shocking in a completely different way. Imagine walking through the doors of an ancient European church, expecting to find religious paintings, stained glass windows, or familiar rows of wooden pews. But just a few seconds later, you realize that what covers the space around you is actually human bones and skulls. That is exactly the feeling you may experience when stepping into Sedlec Ossuary, also known as the Bone Church, located in the city of Gunkanjima, Czech Republic. From the outside, the building does not look particularly frightening. But once you step inside, that feeling can change completely. That is because the remains of more than 40,000 people have been used to create remarkably unusual decorative works throughout the ossuary. And if you think this is simply a room filled with piles of human bones, that's not quite right. The remains were deliberately arranged into artistic compositions. At the center of the chapel stands a large chandelier made from human bones and skulls, spanning much of the interior space. And that's not all. Another prominent work is the coat of arms of the Schwarzenberg family, which was also created using human bones. But the question that makes so many people curious is still this: why would a church contain the remains of tens of thousands of people? To understand that, we have to travel back in time to 1278. At that time, the abbot of Sedlec was sent to Jerusalem by the king of Bohemia. After his journey, he brought back a small amount of soil from the area of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and scattered it over the Sedlec cemetery. Word of this quickly spread, and the cemetery became a highly sought-after burial site for people from across Central Europe. Then history pushed the story even further. During the Middle Ages, Europe was repeatedly devastated by disease and war. The number of deaths increased rapidly, and the Sedlec cemetery became increasingly overcrowded. Older remains were moved to make room for those who had recently died. Over time, an enormous quantity of human bones accumulated there. By the 15th century, a Gothic church was built near the cemetery, and its underground chapel was used to store the remains. The skeletons remained there for centuries. Then, in 1870, a local woodcarver named František Rint was commissioned by the Schwarzenberg family to arrange and decorate the interior using these very human remains, and the result he created would leave generations of visitors astonished. Rather than hiding death away, Sedlec Ossuary transformed what remained of human beings into a powerful reminder of the fleeting nature of life. The human bones here are no longer simply remnants left behind after death. They have been transformed into chandeliers, decorative patterns, family symbols, and artistic structures. What makes the place truly fascinating is that there is no need to invoke anything supernatural to explain Sedlec Ossuary. Instead, it is the historical story behind those more than 40,000 human remains that makes this place so extraordinary. It offers us a glimpse into how people in the Middle Ages confronted death, religious belief, and the memory of those who had passed away. And perhaps the most thought-provoking part is this: when you stand among thousands of human skulls, you cannot help but wonder, if these skeletons could tell their stories, what would they tell us about the lives of the people who lived hundreds of years ago? A garden filled with monsters and idly to a church created from human remains in the Czech Republic, we have just visited two places where history seems to have deliberately left behind questions without complete answers. But if you think places like these are frightening enough, prepare yourself. Because our next destination takes us to the state of Tennessee, where a story involving a family, a witch, and mysterious phenomena has endured for more than 200 years. And the question there is even more disturbing. Was it really just a legend? Or did something actually happen that people still cannot explain to this day? Yes, the place I'm talking about is Bell Witch Cave, where the legend of a witch terrified Tennessee. As you know, our world is full of places that can be frightening for all kinds of reasons. Some are terrifying because of their desolate surroundings, while others send chills down your spine because of what happened there in the past. But there are also places where simply hearing the name is enough to make people think of ghost stories. And Bell Witch Cave in Tennessee, United States, is one such place. The story began in 1804 when farmer John Bell, along with his wife and children, moved to Robertson County, Tennessee. For the first several years, life for the Bell family was relatively normal. No one could have imagined that this seemingly peaceful farm would eventually become the center of one of the most famous haunting legends in American history. According to stories passed down through generations, things began to turn strange in late summer of 1817. Members of the Bell family reportedly began seeing unusually shaped animals around the farm. Then, as night fell, strange sounds started appearing. At first, there were simply knocks on the door. Then came noises coming from the walls, the roof, and throughout the house. What made the situation frightening was that these sounds were reportedly heard without anyone being able to determine where they were coming from. If you heard only a few strange noises during the night, you might blame them on the wind, tree branches, or perhaps an animal. But what happened next was what truly terrified the Bell family. Betsy Bell, John Bell's 12-year-old daughter, was reportedly subjected to attacks by an invisible force that pulled her hair, scratched her, and tormented her. Meanwhile, John Bell's health reportedly began to deteriorate. According to the legend, his condition became so serious that he eventually lost the ability to speak. And this was when the name Kate Batts, a neighbor of the Bell family, began to appear in the story. According to local legend, Kate Batts had previously been involved in a dispute with John Bell. She was said to have become furious and threatened to take revenge on his family. Later versions of the folklore even portrayed Kate as a woman with strange abilities, supposedly capable of predicting the future or appearing in different places during the same period of time. From that point on, local people began referring to the mysterious entity in the story as the Bell Witch. But we need to separate the legend from what can actually be verified. The stories surrounding the Bell Witch were primarily passed down through documents, oral accounts, and local folklore. There is no scientific evidence confirming that a supernatural witch actually haunted the Bell family. It is precisely this mixture of history and legend that has allowed the story to survive for so long. According to the legend, on December 20th, 1820, John Bell died after a long period of declining health. Some versions of the story claim that he was poisoned and suggest that the Bell Witch was somehow involved. After John Bell's death, the strange phenomena were said to gradually disappear. But the story was not over. The legend says that before disappearing, the Bell Witch promised to return after 7 years. And in 1828, exactly 7 years later, an entity believed to be the Bell Witch supposedly returned, speaking with members of the Bell family and making predictions about the future. Over generations, these stories became associated with a cave in the area, which eventually became known as Bell Witch Cave. Today, the cave in Tennessee has become a place associated with local folklore and tourism. People visit not only to explore the cave itself, but also to see firsthand the place that became connected to one of the most famous legends in the American South. Interestingly, although modern science has found no evidence proving the existence of a supernatural witch, the Bell Witch story has continued to survive for more than 2 centuries. So what really happened to the John Bell family? Was it a natural phenomenon, human pranks, memories altered over generations, or simply a story that became more elaborate and mysterious as time passed? Perhaps we will never know for certain. But just imagine this. If you were standing at the entrance to Bell Witch Cave just after sunset, with a pitch-black rocky passage behind you, while outside there was nothing but the sound of the wind and the trees, would you be brave enough to walk inside? Let me know in the comments below. As for me, I'm definitely not going in. I'm a little scared. My friends, leaving Bell Witch behind, we're heading to our next destination, where something even more frightening awaits us. Hundreds of dolls with lifeless eyes hanging from trees on an island in Mexico. And the story behind them is even more disturbing, because it is connected to the death of the very man who spent his life hanging those dolls from the trees. By now, you probably know the place I'm talking about. It is none other than the Island of the Dolls, Mexico, where hundreds of lifeless eyes stare down from the treetops. If there is one place on Earth where simply looking at a few photographs is enough to send a chill down your spine, then Isla de las Muñecas, also known as the Island of the Dolls, in Mexico would certainly have to be on the list. Now imagine this scene. You are sitting in a small boat, slowly making your way through the tree-lined canals south of Mexico City, Mexico. At first, there is nothing particularly frightening about the surroundings. But as you venture deeper into the waterways, strange shapes begin to appear among the trees. A doll with one arm missing. then another with its head gone. Some have nothing left but pale faces with wide open eyes staring down at the water. And then you realize that hundreds of dolls are hanging from trees everywhere. This is Isla de las Muñecas, located within the Xochimilco Canal system, roughly a few hours by boat from central Mexico City, depending on the route. For years, the island has been one of the most mysterious and famous places in Mexico. But why is an island covered in dolls? The story begins with a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera, who is believed to have lived alone on the island for many years. According to local legend, he once discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned in a canal near the island. Not long afterward, Santana Barrera found a doll floating near the area. He believed the doll might have belonged to the girl, so he hung it from a tree as a way of remembering her and praying for her soul. If the story had ended there, Isla de las Muñecas might simply have been a strange memorial. But Santana Barrera did not stop. According to stories passed down over the years, he began collecting more dolls from the canals and other places and bringing them back to hang from the trees. Year after year, the number of dolls continued to grow. What makes the place even more unsettling is that these dolls were not new. Many had become old and deteriorated. Their faces were peeling, their eyes were missing, and their arms and legs were no longer intact. Some had been so badly damaged by the elements that they looked almost like bizarre creatures silently watching everyone who passed by, and nature itself transformed what had once been ordinary children's toys into something that could make even adults swallow hard when walking past them. According to legend, Santana Barrera believed that the girl's spirit was still somewhere around the island. He continued hanging dolls in the hope that they could somehow appease her spirit. But the story became even more chilling in 2001. Don Julian Santana Barrera was found dead in an area believed to be near the same place where he had discovered the girl's body many years earlier. His death quickly made the story surrounding the island even more mysterious. Local people began connecting the two deaths and came to believe that the island had been haunted by a supernatural force. However, just like the Bell Witch story in Tennessee, we need to clearly distinguish between legend and actual evidence. There is no scientific evidence proving that the dolls were possessed by spirits or had the ability to move on their own, but that certainly hasn't diminished the island's appeal. Quite the opposite. Isla de las Muñecas has become increasingly famous. Curious visitors began traveling there to see the bizarre forest of dolls with their own eyes. Some visitors have even brought their own dolls to leave on the island, causing the number of dolls to continue increasing over time. And this is perhaps the most fascinating part. A place that originally became associated with the pain and loneliness of one man eventually transformed into a famous destination, attracting visitors from all over the world. But let me ask you one question. If you were taken to this island at night, when there were no tourists, no boat engines, and nothing but the gentle sound of water against the shore and hundreds of weathered doll faces swaying in the wind, would you dare to stay there alone until sunrise? Maybe not a single doll would actually move. Maybe it is all simply the result of time, weather, and the human imagination. But sometimes, it is precisely the places without clear answers that make us the most curious and the most afraid. Don't you think so? Gunkanjima, the battleship island forgotten by time in the Sea of Japan. Off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, there is an island that, from a distance, looks almost exactly like a gigantic battleship anchored in the middle of the ocean. Towering concrete walls surround the island. Rows of aging buildings stand tightly packed together, their empty windows staring out toward the sea. There are no machines running anymore, no workers, no children running and playing, only the sea wind, weathered walls, and a city that seems to have been left almost exactly as it was. This is Hashima, also known as Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, located about 9.3 miles from Nagasaki. And what is astonishing is that this place once looked completely different from the abandoned landscape we see today. Gunkanjima was once one of Japan's most important coal mining centers. Coal mining operations began here in 1887 when Mitsubishi developed the island into an offshore coal mining facility. The island covered only about 15.6 acres, yet it had to accommodate thousands of workers and their families. To make use of every precious square foot of land, people built countless reinforced concrete structures, apartment buildings, schools, stores, restaurants, movie theaters, playgrounds, sports facilities, bars, religious buildings. Almost everything a community needed could be found on the island. To put it simply, this was like an entire city squeezed into a concrete box in the middle of the sea. By 1959, Gunkanjima's population reached its peak at more than 5,000 people. At the time, its population density was among the highest in the world. It was a tiny island, yet inside it existed an entire miniature society filled with workers, families, children, schools, and everyday life. But that prosperity would not last forever. As the 1960s began, Japan's economy underwent major changes. Petroleum became increasingly important and gradually replaced coal in many industries. The island's coal mines began to lose their economic advantage. Finally, in 1974, Mitsubishi announced the closure of the Gunkanjima coal mine, and then one of the strangest scenes began to unfold. The island's residents gradually left. By April 1974, the last residents boarded boats and returned to Nagasaki. In a remarkably short period of time, a place that had once been home to thousands of people became a city without a single resident. No war had destroyed it. No earthquake had swept it away. No natural disaster had forced the entire community to flee. It was simply abandoned because the economy had changed. After that, Gunkanjima was almost forgotten for roughly 3 decades. Rain, wind, and salty sea air began to erode the concrete structures. Plants grew through walls, hallways, and abandoned rooms. Places that had once echoed with the sounds of human activity were now filled only with dark, empty windows. It was this haunting landscape that gradually earned Hashima the nickname Ghost Island. But the story of Hashima did not end there. In 2001, Mitsubishi transferred ownership of Hashima Island to Takeshima Town. Later, management of the island was transferred to the city of Nagasaki. Local authorities gradually began opening parts of the island to tourism while restoring and reinforcing areas considered safe enough for visitors to access. However, most of the old buildings remain off-limits because of the risk of structural collapse. Then, in July 2015, Hashima was recognized by UNESCO as part of the World Heritage Site, Sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, acknowledging the island's role in Japan's industrialization. And that is what makes Gunkanjima so fascinating. It is not simply a ghost island for telling frightening stories. It is also a historic site that reflects Japan's transformation from a developing nation into an industrial powerhouse. The haunting landscape of Hashima has even served as inspiration and a filming location for movies, including the James Bond film Skyfall. But if we set the movie stories aside, what makes Hashima truly haunting is actually much simpler. Look at those abandoned buildings and try to imagine the lives that once unfolded inside them. A room that once echoed with the voices of children. A hallway once filled with workers returning from their shifts. A classroom where students once sat. A movie theater that once glowed with light. And then it all disappeared. Today, nature is gradually reclaiming what humans once built. Plants grow through concrete, walls crumble and decay, and the sea continues to pound against the island's seawalls day after day. Hashima is like a clock that was stopped in 1974, only for us to have the chance to look back at it half a century later. So, if you ask which place on this list is truly unexplainable, perhaps the answer has nothing to do with ghosts or supernatural phenomena. Because sometimes, the strangest thing of all is how a city that was once packed with thousands of people could become a deserted island simply because one source of energy was replaced. And that is exactly what makes the 5 places we have just explored so special. From the Bomarzo Monster Garden, the Sedlec Ossuary, the Bell Witch legend, and the Island of the Dolls in Mexico, to Gunkanjima in Japan, each one leaves us with a question of its own. In some places, the mystery lies within the stone sculptures. In others, it lies among tens of thousands of human remains. Some are surrounded by legends, and some simply have to stand alone in the middle of the sea to make us feel the immense power of time. So, if you could choose one of these 5 places to explore with your own eyes, which one would you choose? And more importantly, would you be brave enough to actually set foot there? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the fascinating discoveries from Discovery Fact. For now, goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one.